Morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Doug Bruhnke, founder and CEO of Global Chamber. Really pleased to talk about a topic that shifted since we originally planned it. This was a topic that Globies care a lot about, international travel. All of us do it. We either enjoy it or we tolerate it. 2 months ago, it seemed like this was a great topic to talk about tips and ideas for our international travel, and suddenly COVID-19 came along, and now some of us are doing some travel, and obviously there are a lot of different alternatives that we're looking at. So today we're going to talk about travel and tips and how to do it during this period of time, maybe some expectations about what we can expect post-COVID, or during the phase when we're allowed to do a little bit more travel and getting outside. And then we'll also talk about some alternatives to travel. Quite honestly, one of the things that, and one of the reasons why the original idea of Global Chamber came to my mind was the idea that people would travel in a heartbeat. Like, no problem writing a check to spend a couple $1,000s to travel in Asia or go wherever, maybe do multiple trips. And so by the end of the day, you're working on a client, you've spent $10,000 on travel and hotels and all of that, when we could have done that with a warm introduction, or we could have done a lot of that with a warm introduction. So the original idea for Global Chamber has always been, look, you don't have to travel for everything. You can do some things virtually. And so now that, obviously we're not allowed to do a lot of that, the warm introductions and our virtual activities, I think, are being more appreciated, which we do appreciate that folks are getting it now. However, it's something that we'll need to be thinking about going forward for all of us. Instead of just going to the next trade show or flying across the world to do whatever, there are plenty of other ways to go about it. We are going to start, though, by talking about travel, and there's really nobody that we could talk to that would know more about it. Stephen Andert, he has an upcoming book aptly called Surviving Business Travel, which probably has a new meaning now that we're in COVID-19. Stephen, you've been to 25 countries, you've been all around the world, you know a lot about travel, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise, and particularly given the changed situation around the world, what are some of the things that we should all know about?
Hi, well, thank you very much, Doug, for putting this together. Global Chamber is just an incredible resource for people that are doing business all over the world. First of all, let's look at how quickly we changed. 2019 Easter, there was 2.4 million passengers. This year in Easter, there was 90,000. That's just an astronomical difference. I've talked to a number of people who have traveled in the last couple of months, including before and after the travel ban went into effect. And things have gone from normal travel, where the planes are full, everything's normal, and the closer it got to the travel ban, the fuller planes got. People started seeing the writing on the wall and heading home. To the people that traveled after the travel ban, the planes were almost empty, and the immigration customs checks were a breeze, just sped right through. And the only real difference of traveling after the ban was the fact that there was additional information that was provided, like a postcard or a checklist, and in some cases temperature checks, and the recommendation to self-quarantine. The other thing that changed was the closer it got, the bigger exposure, more exposure COVID-19 got, the more people started getting a little more paranoid and jumpy. When somebody sneezes behind you on the plane, you kind of jump and turn around and sit and kind of worry, am I going to catch it now? So looking forward, right now, if you do have to travel and have the ability to travel within the US is not restricted in most cases, but you can take the same precautions that they're telling everybody to take locally. Wash your hands, hand sanitizer, wear a mask. And really, a lot of those things are going to help you stay safe from this. But so really looking forward, what are things going to be like in the future? And that's a big question, and everybody's got some ideas. One thought is, and when you're traveling, a lot of times they sell headphones for the regular economy, and if you're in Premium, Select, or Comfort Plus, or First Class, you get free headphones. Maybe there's going to be face masks that'll be included, and you get a cheap face mask of some kind if you're in the economy section, and you get a little nicer one if you're in First Class. That's one idea that's been floated as an option. But initially, it's probably going to be restricted where the middle seats are going to be held empty, just to create a little extra space. The airlines still need to make a profit, so we can expect that prices probably will go up once travel starts back up. But there's going to be a lot more video calls. I think a lot of people have realized that a lot of the business meetings that had to be done in person before can be done remotely. And I think some of the other speakers are going to talk a little more about that. But really, one of the things that looking forward is going to present some challenges is there's airlines that have furloughed employees. There's hotels that have closed the doors for now. When travel starts resuming, forecasting demand is unlike anything anybody's done before. So it's going to be a combination of the company's confidence. Are we going to send our employees traveling? The traveler confidence. Do I feel comfortable traveling yet? And then government permission. What countries are open for travel? What borders are not closed right now? And that combined with the fact that companies are going to take a closer look and say, let's watch our expenses. If we can accomplish the same goal with a Zoom call, then let's do that instead of putting you on a plane. So, what else is going to change? I can see the possibility of temperature checks at every border crossing. Have your passport out, and they'll have a thermometer there and check your temperature on your way in. Maybe some health checks. For those of us that have traveled to yellow fever countries, you have to have a yellow fever card to get into the country, showing that you have a valid yellow fever vaccine. Chile just announced that they are going to be the first country to have a COVID immunity card, and that will provide proof that you're no longer contagious for COVID. So, transportation, hotels, and airlines are going to win by showing their customers and the traveling public what steps they're taking to increase the level of cleanliness. There's been plenty of stories long before COVID about whether hotels and planes and things like that are getting cleaned enough between guests. And so going forward, that's going to be a bigger issue rather than just maybe some sticky soda on the back of a plane seat or something like that. They're going to have to find some way to show customers that things are being cleaned. And I don't know, and I think that presents a great opportunity for those businesses to maybe win over some customers from other brands by showing that they're keeping their planes cleaner than the competition, or cleaning the hotel rooms deeply after every guest. So that's really my take on where we are now and what we're doing looking forward.
Okay, great information. So we're going to be saving most of the questions for after the speakers talk. So if you could send your Q&A, any questions that you have, we'll do the A, you do the Q, and send it into the chat room there, the Q&A, or send it to email at info@globalchamber.org, and we'll handle it one way or another to any of the speakers. Our next speaker is Ari Charlestein. He's the founder at First Class and Beyond. And one of the things about Ari is that he's always been known as a problem solver. And so Ari, there are some problems out there. So you've got a career and you've got an experience where you've worked with travelers, first class travelers and others. And we've got some real challenges out there. How do you see things? We look forward to learning more about your perspective on this.
Absolutely. And thank you, Doug, for including me in this panel. Just by way of introduction, because I am new to the Global Chamber, my background has always been with a focus on points and miles in the loyalty space. So while I do have an arm of my business where I do focus on traditional corporate travel, I do focus a lot of my attention on points and miles. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of what we're seeing right now, both in terms of numbers, in terms of projections, both from the corporate traditional travel side as well as from the points and miles side. It's very funny that Stephen started off with the numbers comparing Easter travel to today's travel, because I actually put up a chart in front of me that was loaded by the TSA, and it's updated every day, from the number of travelers that passed through TSA checkpoints on that day in 2019 versus that same day in 2020. And it's absolutely staggering. We're looking at about 4% of travelers now flying. So you're looking at a 96% decrease, which is absolutely unprecedented. And it's no surprise as a result that airlines are losing a lot of money, and it's not a good time, despite their mass efforts to cut flights really significantly, to the point where international powerhouses, Lufthansa, I believe right now, is operating 6 or 7 international flights. Emirates, with the exception of very few outbound only flights, has completely eliminated all of their international flights. United recorded a $2.1 billion first quarter loss. And we're used to losses, we're used to big numbers, but $2.1 billion is not normal. Delta has reported a quarterly loss in Q1 of 2020 for the first time in 5 years. So this is not something that is a small glitch in the system. This is not an anomaly of there's a sickness in one country and so we just want to avoid travel to that region. This is really much more significant. Air Canada, for example, just recently announced that they are no longer flying between the United States and Canada till at least the end of May. That's the first time since, I believe, the 1940s that Air Canada has not had regular service into the United States. On the side of what that means to these airlines are short for money. These hotel chains are short for money. And they want to do everything they can to ensure not only that they have a cash flow now, but that their solid, loyal travel base is going to continue to want to travel with them, to stay with them, and to fly with them into the future. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of pushes to engage with clients and to promote that loyalty. And not to mention, to put some money in our pockets from the airline's perspective. Alaska Airlines and American, most notably, have had mileage sales at the highest rate that we've seen in recent memory. Alaska Airlines is selling miles with a 60% bonus. American Airlines is selling miles at a 50% discount. Hilton and American Express, as you know, a lot of these airlines and hotels have co-branded credit card deals. And so what happens with these deals generally is that in a credit card issuer, American Express, for example, will buy 1 million points every month, however many points every so often, to give to their credit card users as sign-up bonuses, as meeting spending thresholds, etc. But Hilton and some of the other airlines are desperately in need of cash because hotels are closing and flights are being canceled. And it's just been reported that American Express just bought somewhere in the order of 500 to 600 billion points from Hilton Honors in advance. 500 billion, that is 500 billion points. Now, we don't know the logistics of how many they're buying on a regular basis, how often they're buying these points, but they're certainly not fronting close to $1 billion for these kinds of purchases on a regular basis. So this just goes to show, certainly American Express, I assume, is getting some great benefits by doing this, but it just goes to show how, for lack of a better term, desperate some of these companies are, and it's sad to see. And of course, we hope that this changes moving forward. But it's just the way it is. As I'm sure a lot of the people watching this are frequent travelers or certainly business travelers, many are familiar with and maybe even are members of the Global Entry Program. Even the government is getting on the horn of wanting to not lose people, and so they have extended their expiration dates on soon to be expiring Global Entry cards by 18 months. So if you do have a Global Entry card that is expiring in the immediate future, you do still need to apply for that reapproval, but you don't have to worry if you're not able to get in for that meeting. Simply have a copy of that reapproval, and you should be good to go for an additional 18 months. Tangentially, one side note for that, unfortunately, due to some bad blood, I guess we'll call it, between the federal government and the state of New York, residents of the state of New York are still not eligible to renew their global entry, regardless of the coronavirus. Some other things from the loyalty side of things that airlines are doing, they're trying to innovate, right? How can we let people still feel like they're earning miles or still feel like they matter to us despite not actually being on the plane? Two airlines that come to mind are Air Canada and American Airlines. Both of them, Air Canada has made it possible to actually earn status and elite miles through their credit card spend. So staying at home and buying your groceries and doing whatever you need to do, you can, if you earn, I believe it's 50,000 miles through credit card spend or sign up bonuses or whatever it is you're doing by earning those points at home, you can earn their lowest level prestige status, their 25,000 mile status. So that's a nice way to engage customers. American Airlines has also, like many airlines, extended statuses, which is great. And has actually now allowed credit card spending to count towards million mile status, which is something that they were not previously doing. Hotels are extending their statuses, and a lot of us have credit cards with hotels that offer a free night certificate annually. And there was a lot of worry, what am I going to do with my free night certificate? I'm not traveling. And thankfully, a lot of those hotels have now either indefinitely or for 6 months or for 12 months or for 18 months extended the life of those. Some trends that we're seeing with the hotel, Hyatt just announced that they are actually selling some of their rooms as office space. Now, that's not necessarily new to see hotels sell day rooms, but to market it as an office is something new. And it's very interesting to see that. And I don't know if that's going to be a trend that we see long into the future, but it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. And while I definitely do agree with the idea that not everything needs to be done in person, you know, it is clear that travel is not done forever, right? This is not something that is going to be indefinite. This is something that's going to take some time to fix, but it is going to go back. To Stephen's point of that kind of three-headed monster as far as how we're going to determine when travel is ready, namely airlines being ready, travelers being ready, and governments being ready, I think that is an absolutely perfect assessment of how we have to judge moving forward. There are certainly going to be travelers like myself who are going to be ready to travel a little earlier, a little more intrepid. There are certainly people who are going to be very, very conservative, and even after every country in the world is open, they're still not going to be ready to travel for another 6 to 12 months. So at the earliest, I'm not expecting any regularity of air travel until at least the middle or maybe even end of next year. Now, I do expect airlines and countries to be opening up by the end of this year, beginning of next year. I don't see how it's going to go beyond that for no flights to start going, but I don't expect any sense of normalcy until at least another 6 or 12 months beyond that. The one last thing I'll say before I yield my time here is related to the points and miles field. And that is, especially in this time when flights are so empty and airlines are so unsure of their future, many have been forced to, not necessarily forced to, but have decided to open up a lot more award availability. So for those of you that are maybe a little bit of a risk taker, not to travel now, certainly I don't condone or endorse that, but for those that think it might be better in September, November, January, March, April, airlines release award seats up to 11 months in advance. So if you have miles and if you have a trip that you're looking to take, you know that finding mileage availability is not easy. This could be a great time to look into that. And many airlines like American are offering discounts, some discounts as deep as 40 or 50% for their what they call web saver awards to encourage people to book travel now. And thankfully, that is kind of what I do at First Class and Beyond. We help people get more value out of their miles. So if that's something that anybody has questions about, obviously, I'm happy to answer any of those as well.
Okay, great. So we've really got both of you, Stephen and Ari, both on the travel side, and so we probably should answer a few questions before we move on to some virtual alternatives to travel. That you mentioned about pricing and that there are these deals out there. In general, what do prices look like? Have prices gone up? Are they discounting to get people, on the plane? Kind of what's the general theme out there in terms of how the airlines are handling it, or is there a general theme?
Well, I would say that there is a general theme, and it definitely ranges, right? Are we talking about airlines trying to get you to book a flight for next week, or are we talking about airlines trying to get you to book a flight for March? Miles versus revenue. For example, a few days ago, I just did a random search for a flight from Miami to Los Angeles for next week, and they were selling for something like $60 each way. I mean, that's crazy. Now, I don't know who's flying from Miami to Los Angeles next week. The loads of these planes are minuscule. We're talking, anywhere between 5 and 15 people on a flight. But, even internationally, I saw yesterday, I posted a deal to some of my followers. There was a deal from Italy to Brazil for €190 round trip, flying anywhere between October and March. Now, that sounds like a great deal, and that's all well and good, but the Italian government doesn't even know if they're going to allow visitors into the country before the middle of next year. And that could possibly even include some European Union citizens. And who knows, Brazil is almost as badly inflicted as Spain and Italy. And so who knows if that travel is even going to be possible. And so while these deals exist, I definitely urge people to tread lightly and with caution, because the way I've done it in my head is I'm saying I'm booking these trips, I'm excited for them, but I'm not expecting to go. And that way, if I cancel, I'm not too disappointed, because I do expect that some of these trips that I have planned, and I have planned several for myself, will get canceled. But I'm still booking.
Got it. Yeah. How have you shifted your own business given kind of this current reality?
That is a great question, and a very scary one. My business, 30% of it is consulting, or maybe 20% of it is consulting, but 80% of it is booking tickets. And given that travel is down 95%, so is the booking business. So we have unfortunately had to spend a lot of time over the last 3 or 4 weeks canceling flights and fighting with airlines on behalf of our clients. We do have a small trickling of people who are still preparing for travel for end of this year and beginning of next year. But we've now switched our focus, and I'm now working on a lot of things like this web content. I'm putting together a lot of consults with clients. I'm doing a lot more. I'm pivoting to do a lot more consulting to position people and to prepare them for the future when it is back open, to encourage those that fit the right mesh and need to buy miles where necessary, to sign up for the right cards. Airlines are now giving, instead of 3 or 4 months to meet spending bonuses, they're giving 6 or 12 months to meet spending bonuses. So I'm encouraging people to do some of that. But it's certainly very difficult. And I don't expect my business to get back to normal until at least spring or summer of next year. But we're holding steady, and I do things like this. I speak a lot, I do consulting, and we're getting by. We're doing our best.
Okay, got it. Keep the questions coming in. We'll continue on the travel theme. Couple questions. How will airlines in the hospitality industry in particular, accustomed to building brand loyalty, attract and keep travelers post-COVID-19? So what are the shifts in how they'll be marketing to us, business travelers and individual travelers? Any ideas there?
Well, yeah, I think one of the ways that they have some potential to attract new business and keep the loyalty is, like I mentioned, showing how they're doing more than anybody else to keep their customers safe. And whether it's deep cleaning, whether there's wrappers around each seat that get changed, or tape that goes over the seat once they've cleaned it on the planes, or deep cleaning the carpets after every customer, or things like that for the hotels. no more of the options to maybe additional laundering options for bedspreads in hotels and things like that, where they're going above and beyond just a standard cleaning. I think is going to be one of the ways. And another way is being more generous with their cancellation policies. I think all of the travel providers have gone above and beyond and significantly relaxed their cancellation penalties and things like that because of this. And the ones that were slower to do it got a lot of bad press because of it. The early adopters, the first ones to announce a relaxation of the cancellation penalties, are the ones that got a lot of positive press.
I would also add, and again, this is from my skew of worldview when it comes to travel, always looking at the loyalty side, is trying to really push towards points and status, not only for the members that are already loyal, but to potentially bring new people into the brand. We saw a huge gold rush of amazing promotions from hotel chains around between 2006, 7 up to 2009 or 10, maybe even into 2011. That was really the heyday of promotions, where you were getting free nights for, as little as 3 stays. You were getting 2, 3, 4 times the number of points for just about everything. And while hotels are obviously in a tough spot financially, and they'll, that's on them to try and make it work for their financial records, but they're going to unfortunately be in a really, really tough position, and are going to have to maybe even sacrifice a little bit more upfront for playing the long game. And so I do think that we're going to see some real potential benefits for loyalty, as far as getting status more quickly, and as far as earning points more quickly as well.
Are there destinations right now that are safer than others? We hear about how different countries are handling it, and some countries are still open. Do you see that in the travel numbers in terms of some of the countries, and would you advise people to consider and be open to travel to certain places right now?
I think it's kind of a catch-22, because the safer countries are safer because they're being more strict. You look at countries like New Zealand, like Chile, like Israel. You can't get into these countries. I mean, even if you wanted to. I know Israel, for example, has a ban on all travelers that are not Israeli citizens or permanent residents. Just as a personal point, my mother lives in Israel a good portion of the year, but is not an official permanent resident or citizen, and can't get into the country, because she was told that if she tries to get in, she's going to get put right back on that plane. And so, yeah, New Zealand is another perfect example, having just talked about potentially keeping the country closed from visitors until a vaccine is found. So the safest countries are safest because they are not letting people in, and they're going to continue to do that to keep their citizens safe. Anywhere you go for the foreseeable future is going to be certainly at an increased risk, but not to the point necessarily because traveling is more dangerous, but because going outside is more dangerous. Going to Costco is just as dangerous as going to country X. There are certainly countries that are harder hit, Italy, Spain, for example. But as far as the less dangerous countries, it's still something that you're going to have to use definite increased caution when you go.
I think it also boils down to each person. Different people are in different demographics that are at higher risk. If you've got a healthy immune system and rarely even get a cold, then you might be safer to travel pretty much anywhere, because your immune system can probably handle it better. But if your immune system is compromised, or you're in the age groups that are more at risk for the virus, you might want to play it a little bit safer.
That makes sense. Kind of along that same line, question coming in around Clear and maybe the TSA services. Do you see biometric service providers like Clear integrating some sort of COVID clearance? Is the technology to the point, or will it be, where that'll be part of jumping on a plane?
I'm sure that's one of the approaches it's currently being used in some places. I believe Singapore has temperature checks that are, you don't even need to stop for them. They're checking them as you go by and people are being flagged. So yes, that technology is definitely going to be integrated with Clear, if not today, very soon, I expect.
And to that point, again, and this is not just COVID. There are countries, and you had mentioned, Stephen, countries like yellow fever countries. This happens a lot in Africa and a lot in Asia, where when you walk through after coming into an arrival hall before you get to immigration, before you get to baggage claim, you'll see heat sensor monitors on the ceiling, and you're being watched by these heat sensor monitors to see if you have a temperature without people actually taking your temperature. And so do I see that happening in more and more airports? I wouldn't be surprised. But again, knowing how much people love their freedoms in the United States, for better or for worse, I see a lot of backlash to anything that would record us, watch us, check us more than absolutely necessary in a life and death case. And again, you can argue whether or not this qualifies. And again, I don't want to get into the politics of whether, this is good or bad, and what constitutes a freedom and your constitutional rights and what infringes on those constitutional rights. But you can definitely expect that if anything like that were to be implemented or considered to be implemented in the United States, it would not be 1, 2, 3 because we think it's good for safety and health. It would be a long battle because unfortunately that's the way things work in America.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is the cruise industry dead? What happens? You gave some pretty pessimistic views about airplanes and next year, middle of next year, end of next year. I mean, when could you go on a cruise that's so tight quarters typically?
I would say be able to around the same time period.
Yep.
There are people who will not travel unless it's a cruise, and then there are people like me who won't travel on a cruise. So it's, there's a very different demographic. I think for diehard cruisers, they're going to say, listen, as soon as I'm allowed and as soon as the government says it's okay, I'm on. But I think it's going to be an even slower rollout. They're petri dishes, for lack of a better term. No matter how much sanitation you do, it's all buffet, it's all big theaters, it's a real shame. It's a difficult case.
Yeah, very close quarters. What about Airbnb and Uber? How are they being impacted? Those are obviously being impacted for sure.
Airbnb in a lot of places has implemented a 1-month policy right now. They don't want to put their guests and hosts at risk to continuously be coming in and out of contact with each other, doorknobs, bed sheets, everything. And so they're saying that, for particular areas, if you're not staying for a minimum of 1 month, we're not renting to you. But I think Airbnb of all places, and certainly when I was talking to people who were still a little weary of travel, beginning of February, what should I do? I don't want to stay in a hotel. I was encouraging people that Airbnb, of all the ways to have to stay somewhere, was probably of the safer ways. I would probably hold by that in terms of when things start to open up. But it's very much like the hotel industry, and Airbnb, not having a traditional loyalty program, it might be a little bit more difficult for them to encourage people to come in.
Got it.
Just to tack onto that, one of the benefits, just to make it clear, of Airbnb is you walk into a hotel, you're walking through a lobby with 50, 100 people, you're talking to or seeing half a dozen people, you're going in and out of elevators. You've got so much more contact, which puts you at higher risk, where Airbnb, you may or may not even see your host the whole time you're there. So there's a lot less contact. So it really does make for a less likely contagion location.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. This is a question from Dr. Shah, who we'll actually be interviewing next week in a Globinar from India. How about travel by car within the U.S. Or within Canada? Are there more people traveling by road? I mean, I think all of us are seeing that there's not much travel on the roads either, is there? And basically, are you guys seeing business travel where people are saying, okay, I'm not ready for the plane yet, but I'm going to hit the road? Is that happening out there?
I'm not saying that on business travel yet, just because all of our customers are still working from home. So it would do me no good to go over to California to meet with a customer who is working from home. And so the 5 people I need to meet with are in 5 different places anyway.
Sure.
But as things loosen up, I can certainly see some people who might be a little bit more concerned about getting on a plane, taking a reasonable drive. Also for the vacation travelers, I can completely see, I've even seen some prominent bloggers talking about that they're going to spend more time focusing on driving trips instead of airplane trips in the immediate future.
I can touch on that as well. Just from a personal standpoint, about a month ago when we started seeing the lockdowns happening in California and Washington, being from Philadelphia, I decided that I didn't want the cold weather, and my family has a house in Florida. And so I said, I want to ride this out. If I can't leave my house, I want to do it somewhere warm. But I did not feel comfortable flying. And so we did a 3-day drive. Consulted with a family friend who is a infectious disease specialist, and was told, listen, there's no safe answer. Certainly driving is safer than flying, but again, hotels, lobbies, things like that are a potential risk. So the advice given to me at that time was stay in hotels that are off the beaten track, stay in hotels that generally have lower occupancy, stay in hotels that are further away and not in big cities. And driving with a 4-month-old, we had no choice but to stay in 2 different hotels during that drive. But we stayed in cities about 45 minutes from any major city and small hotels with very low occupancy. But moving forward, I think I think it's an interesting question, because again, hotels, at least right now, many of them are closing their doors completely or only to emergency workers. Flights, on the other hand, with the exception of maybe that 10-minute interaction with a TSA agent, and that's a whole separate conversation, you're not seeing many people at airports these days. And so I do have good friends who work in businesses that are still operating. And, a good friend of mine just last week had to be in Columbus, Ohio, leaving from New York. And he decided it was safer for him to fly than to drive and stop in a hotel halfway through. So again, I think that's all personal preference. I think you all have to make your own decision, but I think there is something to be said for both cases.
Okay. This kind of relates to that. I think it's a great question from Eric. The governor of Jalisco, Mexico, has closed all airports today. Do you have a website, or do you recommend a place where people can check on both car travel and air travel if they're trying to get from point A to point B? Let's say they're trying to do that by car. I don't think any states are closed to auto travel. I don't know what's actually maybe in New York. I don't know. Are there places that, is there a place where you can go to kind of check either in Mexico or the US or any place in terms of what's open and what's not?
I know there is a regularly updated article from Forbes that is updating on a regular basis international and airline policies and then national policies, which countries are closing their borders and which airlines are doing what, both in terms of operating flights and canceling flights. I don't know of any resource that would have that for cars. I also don't know of any states closing their borders, although I know that there was a time, and maybe it's still happening, that travelers from New York, and that means cars with New York plates, as well as flights flying in from New York into the state of Florida, were being either turned away or forced to self-quarantine for 14 days.
Yep, I heard the same thing about Rhode Island as well, or from Massachusetts or something. I don't know. So yeah, so talk to professionals like Ari and Stephen.
One of the things that I've heard, and I talked to a number of people in Colorado when they were enforcing their shelter in place, they were discouraging people from going to like parks and areas like that, and they were ticketing cars with out-of-state license plates. I heard a number of cases of that.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. We're going to shift now just for a moment to some virtual alternatives. And so Lothar Soliwon, he's the CEO of ZG Worldwide Consultants, similar to what Global Chamber has done with our virtual approach. Lothar had a little bit of a different spin on it, but the same type of idea where he said, hey, what if we could build a consulting crew around the world so that you don't necessarily have to fly to Ghana to do consulting or do work or do activity there. You can actually, we'll find someone there that you can know and trust and who's very capable, and you can basically do work in Ghana from a remote distance. And so lo and behold, Lothar, that model, as business starts to ramp up, hopefully will become more appreciated. You were going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about kind of how that came about and the value for businesses that take that approach.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to talk broadly about alternatives to travel on globally and in the US, currently with COVID, and then post-COVID, when hopefully there'll be a vaccine soon and things will turn around quickly, probably, I don't know. But I would think there'd be a fairly quick recovery, such as like people were very frightened of polio in the early 1950s, didn't want to go anywhere, go to a swimming pool or any crowds. There was kind of a scare, polio scare, and that went away after the vaccine. Travel is something that some people love and some people hate. A lot of people are tired to travel. People have been traveling for 20 years in their jobs and they're sick of it. It's a lot of wear and tear on some people. Leg room and airlines is terrible. First class and corporate jets help a lot. It eats a lot of time. You know, if you go somewhere, you're wasting a lot of time, or you could be doing something else. And right now, as you've discussed, there's many places you can't even get to. One thing I'd like to first point out, there's an alternative for some people to airline travel and driving, and that's Amtrak. In certain places, there's good train service, great leg room, not too expensive. You know, it's for most of the country, that's not the case, but I just wanted to mention that someone who's never tried a train, is not bad. You know, Northeast Corridor is pretty good. It's as quick as flying when you're on the Acela. So that's just something you might want to think about depending on where you live. I'd like to talk about video conferencing just shortly. The corporate bean counters love video conferencing, and they hope it continues because it saves them a lot of time. These people are always looking for a place to save a buck, and this saves an awful lot of money. Many corporations do a great deal of outsourcing for software development, engineering, accounting, or whatever. They save a lot of money. I mean, there's risks to it, but 50% of these big corporations do a lot of outsourcing. And another dimension of outsourcing is finding consultants far away from where you're at to be your surrogate, an emissary, to do risk assessment, research. There's many things that a consultant can do far away for you. Say if you're looking for someone in Africa or Europe, instead of flying there, you can find somebody who can do something. No, there's risk. There's a risk in finding the right people. Are they competent? Are they crooks? I mean, there's many variables. It's kind of frightening. You know, you don't want to get into a situation where you get too deep with someone who's not right. But then again, the local people know the culture. You can't just send somebody from the US to a lot of African countries and expect them to accomplish very much. They won't talk to you. They want your money, you know, to stay somewhere. But you can't walk into a ministry of something or other, or, you know, looking for possible opportunities or partnerships. You want a local person who's competent and knows the local culture, the language, the business protocols. It just helps to have someone local. It's like in China, there's a lot of things you just can't do in China on your own. You need somebody in China to help you along the way. They just want an American to drop into China or Vietnam or whatever. The local people have to pave the way in establishing your business there. The only way to get something done may be to involve these local experts. How do you find someone? Well, first of all, Global Chamber has many offices all over the world. You can start there. That's a great place to make some contacts. You're in all the bigger cities all over the world. basically. And the local global chamber executive directors know what's going on locally. I mean, that's no guarantee these people they know will eventually not be the right fit, but it's a very good start. And there's, for some of the smaller cities, there's local chambers of commerce, even in pretty remote kinds of countries. There's some kind of business organization, and you can always do your own Google search for business consultants in many cities, and it's surprising how many business consultants you come up with. But again, how many of these people really know anything? That's a big question. And then many U.S. consulting companies, such as ZG Worldwide, have connections and partnerships in other parts of the world. One place I think many people don't want to go to for getting consulting assistance is these huge multinational global consulting companies. They want consulting jobs that go into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, I'm not saying you don't want to go to them. If you're a big corporation, that's what you want. That's what you can afford. But I think a lot of global chamber members don't want to do that. So due diligence is very important. One suggestion I have is if you do hire someone from far away, start small to get to know them, to get a feel. Do these people seem to know what they're doing? Do they seem honest to you? Do you get along with them? Are they responding to you? Are they doing what you want them to do? I mean, it's best that you can just shut it down. If you're not getting what you want, you may want to go to somebody else. And also, it's important to give some training and coaching or whatever. Just don't turn them loose. And to do something, you need to spend some time to make sure they know what you want, and have them make sure they ask questions. So you develop a relationship so they don't go off like a loose cannon and mess up something on your company, give your company a bad name. So that's it.
Doug, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, there you go.
My computer fan is a little bit noisy, so I tried to ease that. You're touching on a topic that we're going to be talking about May 5th, which is how to build a distribution network, which is also part of that, right? Is like, who do you trust in the community? And that's a little bit more difficult to dip a toe in, because you've really got to pick somebody and kind of run with it. But a lot of the same issues are there, right? In terms of, who do you trust? And that's a lot of what you do in terms of the vetting that you do within ZG Worldwide. And certainly it's a lot of what we do at Global Chamber as we set up these hundreds of chapters around the world, understanding who we're dealing with so that we can trust them and that our members can trust them. It's a process that when you're doing it hundreds of times, hopefully, we get it right most of the time. And actually, we've gotten it right most of the time, which is kind of cool. We have our last speaker was intended to be Carlos Fernando Castello, who's the CEO of Hamster and Sniper. They have a really amazing technology around virtual reality. He's not able to join, but Christian Aguirre, who's the executive director for Global Chamber in Hermosillo. Speaking of someone we know and trust, Christian is somebody who knows about Hamster and Sniper and what they do, and he's stepped in to say a few words about the technology and how we should be thinking about it in today's world. Christian, thanks for your flexibility. Appreciate you jumping in today.
Thank you for the invitation, Doc. Good morning to everyone. And yeah, I'd like to add that Hamster and Sniper has very interesting technology related to virtual tours or making those types of service, virtual tours, so companies can present, for example, in real estate and other types of companies, they can present a virtual tour of an office, of a house, or even a large corporation and building It's a 360 virtual tour they can offer. They can develop that. They have been developing or using that technology for a couple of years now. And also, I'd like to talk about other members in global chambers, such as Necodex and PuzzleX. PuzzleX being one of our newest members, who also have that technology and service available.
Okay, great. So are you seeing and expecting, based on your interactions with them, that these are technologies that are going to have more of a play going forward? The hospitality side and virtual reality and commercial real estate and the ability to kind of walk through a building where you don't have to be actually walking through a building. These seem like pretty spectacular opportunities, let alone instead of traveling to some distant place, actually visiting that place through virtual reality.
Yes, due to the circumstances and the situation we are perceiving right now, and we definitely still don't know how long this is going to take. We've been, in the beginning, we were getting some good news from Asian countries, and then we are seeing some, probably they were not ready to open back up again. Mexico has a difficult situation right now. I mean, the coronavirus situation is getting to us. It took more time than other countries, but it's already here. So some of the most affected parts of the country are Central Mexico, Mexico City, Mexico State, and North Baja California. So yeah, the situation, we are just getting there, but we gotta work with these alternatives, and one of them are these kinds of services that Hamster and Sniper offers, as well as Necodex and PuzzleX.
Got it. Okay. There's a question going back to Lothar. This is a question related to Lothar, someone that you know. He knew you before you jumped into Global Chamber, actually, and he loved your ZG Africa initiative. The biggest challenge, he's saying, is trust. Will the pandemic push folks to have more trust in international consultants despite the reduced in-personal contacts? What's your sense of that, or your prediction, your magic crystal ball?
Well, I think there is, some people are trusting. For example, you go to these dating sites, people are looking for boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses on virtual reality. There's an element of trust, but then again, you have to really use your gut feeling. Are these people competent, or are they really who they say they are, or what their desires and wants are? There is trust to a certain degree, but you have to shut it down. Start slow, start small, and then keep moving along if they work out well for you. So I think there is trust. There's some people are trustworthy, some people aren't. You just have to, references too. Who are there? What references do these people have? Have they been successful in doing what you want them to do? I mean, that if someone, you talk to somebody who has been a client and they're satisfied, and the references can be a joke too. References can be a bunch of baloney. It's somebody's drinking buddy or something. You know what I mean? But if you find a reference, a business reference to someone who's actually been a client, then that go for it. But be ready to shut it down. But you can say the same thing locally here. Within the local community, there's a lot of, in the Springfield, Illinois Chamber of Commerce, there's crooks, there's people doing all sorts of shady stuff. You run into the same thing very locally. So I mean, it's a global problem. It's always been there. There's a lot of shady shysters around. So
yep. No, to be fair, so it's sometimes tough to discern that locally, and when you take it internationally, it's another order of level of difficulty. And I think in your case, Lothar, you've been through a lot of it, so you've kind of been through and back, and probably been burned a couple times, like I have. Through my 30 plus years of experience, and you learn along the way. When I try to explain how do you learn to trust people, and how can you develop a network that really we've had very few issues with on a personal level, And it's hard to explain. There are some basic principles around it, but it goes back to working with people that know how to do it. And so all the people on this call certainly are very well experienced, and talk to them. If you have any trouble getting back with them, send an email to info@globalchamber.org, and we'll be able to connect you as well. So we've only got about 3 minutes left. We've got a few more questions. And so this one from India is an interesting one. So maybe this is a good way for maybe get your last 30 seconds for each of you in terms of what are each of you expecting kind of the new normal to be, and what do you expect over the next, it sounds like not just 6 months and not just a year, maybe over the next 2 years through the end of 2021. What's each of your crystal balls in terms of what we can expect over the next couple of years relative to travel and businesses coming back up?
Sorry.
Stephen, you want to kick off?
Sure. Well, my crystal ball is actually in the shop right now. I was expecting it back a few days ago, but I think COVID has slowed down the delivery days.
Yep.
I think the new normal is yet to be defined. I think, like we've all alluded to, business travel is going to look different. Even just business is going to look different. Companies that in the past did not have work from home policies are suddenly, everybody's working from home, and somehow they're getting it done. Most of those will, the employees especially, I think, that have now tasted that sense of freedom, are going to resist being shackled to an office from 8 to 5. So I think that's going to be one big change, that we're going to see a lot more permanent or regular basis work from home. But as far as business travel goes, the same thing applies. There's some people that are chomping at the bit, can't wait till international travel is an option again, and companies start allowing it again. And there's some people who are saying, this is great, I love not traveling, I'm getting stuff done around the house more now. And they're gonna embrace the video conferencing and stick with that. That being said, I think hotels we're going to see, I think, some consolidation. Some of the hotels and airlines, I think, that have closed routes and closed hotels, I don't think all of them are going to bounce back the day travel opens back up. It's going to be gradual, and it's probably going to be several years before we see the same number of flights, the same number of hotels and hotel rooms available throughout the world, which really doesn't bode well for the tourism industry. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Are you going to change the title of your book or change the publish date for that?
No, haven't thought of that. I think it applies. Surviving business travel just has a little bit deeper of a meaning now.
Got it. Okay, very cool. Ari, what's your crystal ball say?
Yeah, I think, as I alluded to, on the personal side, nothing before middle of next year. But I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. Using Emirates as kind of how I'm judging a lot of this, being the global airline that they are, that connects so much of the world from continent to continent, using them to see what their schedule looks like. They just announced, I think a few days ago, maybe last week, that they will not plan on reopening their international network until July 1st. And that's at the earliest. So, and who knows if that's going to be a full opening, from 0 to 60, or if that's going to be a gradual. So certainly from a global business travel perspective, certainly very, very, very slow. And I think, like some of these technologies we've spoken about, and like Stephen just alluded to, companies and individuals have now realized on the personal side, the employee side, I can do this from home. And from the corporate side, these bean counters are pretty happy because they're realizing, oh man, we just cut our travel budget in half because only half of what we're doing really isn't able to be done right now. And so I definitely expect corporate travel basically forever to take at least some type of hit, because some companies are just not going to go back. Now, once you are able to go back, of course, there are companies and individuals who are going to want that. But even at full, so to speak, that might look like 80%, 85%. And again, that might not be until 2022 to get to that kind of complete recovery. And from the personal side, again, it's just a matter of when you personally feel comfortable. Again, I feel comfortable planning. I've just booked last week trips for November and for March. I have no idea if I'm going to go on either of those. I really don't. But again, that's part of what I'm here for, and still operating and still helping companies, doing their miles and points planning and consulting, and trying to help people even in this unknowing time leverage the value of their personal and corporate spend to get more value out of their miles, because there's all kinds of ways. So that's all I've got, and here's hoping that this is just a blimp in history very, very quickly.
I hear you. We've actually reached the end of our hour. We're 1 minute over, so I apologize. We're going to have to end it right now. So if you have any additional comments by our other speakers, we'll include in a blog post over the next week or two. And then stay engaged as a member of Global Chamber. If you're not yet a member, consider joining the Global Tribe. Really appreciate all 4 of you for speaking today. Really enlightening about travel, about alternatives, and this is obviously a topic that's going to be of high interest to all of us over the next months and years. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for speaking. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Doug.
Take care.